Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
I love that drop, man. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, depending on where you are at. I'm Todd DeVoe, and I'm the host of the Business Continuity Today show. And I am the Director of Emergency Management at Titan HST, and I'm also an educator at the post-secondary level. I love to learn. I love reading. I love figuring things out, and I love to share what I've learned with you. So today we're going to talk about, incident management and how it impacts business continuity, or maybe the other way around, how business continuity impacts business incident management. But let's first talk about what an incident is. Well, depends on how you want to define it. All right. In the case of a business continuity, an incident is going to be anything that disrupts your business operations. Right. So it could be an emergency, such as a fire in your building. I laugh because we had one of those one time. We were about to go live on a show, and we had a fire in our building. It disrupted what we were doing. And that being said, that we had to go outside and try to figure out what was going on and see what the next steps were going to be dealing with that incident. Now, it could be disruption in supply chains, right? If you take a look what's going on today. Matter of fact, I was just at the store the other day, and the shelves are becoming more bare and bare and bare. So as a retailer, the supply chain issue is going to be an incident that's disrupting your business operations. Now, what do we do? So there's a difference between an emergency operations plan, right, which is like really taking a look at the earthquakes and natural disasters and any type of an emergency that can impact you. But what's an incident management plan? Well, it's just as it is. It's just, what are we looking at specifically for an incident before it cascades into something larger? As we talked about last week, the cascading effect between, as you go up the chain, if you will, of impacts of that incident. Because critical incidents can occur anytime, anywhere. And again, it's not that limited to traditional business hours, right? So this could happen, off campus, if you think about something, if you're a college, or if you have anybody who's traveling, sports teams and things like this, if it's away from your particular place of employment or where you're doing your work, right? I think about the time when I was at a university, and we had a group of students that were out in Brazil, and they had a bus rollover. Thank God no one was hurt, but it was still an incident that we had to plan for, and we had to manage remotely. So it could be anywhere around. A well-orchestrated incident management team allows to minimize the impact on the business disruptions. So that's why you're taking a look at it. So you're not necessarily planning for every potential incident that could potentially happen at your place of business, but you have to be considering, the major things and what you can do and put the plan in place. So for instance, if we take a look at that bus rollover, right, there was a call down sheet that we had to be able to get. We automated this, by the way, so the call down sheet is a bad term to use. We had a automation way of doing it, of getting everybody who needed to come into the office to come into the office. We started contacting the parents of the students as allowed to by law, because there's some certain restrictions that we have to go through, understanding what those restrictions are and how that system works. Right. So managing that incident remotely, right, we didn't have all the information that was coming in. So the other side of the incident management is, how are you getting information, and how are you monitoring that information, and what software can you use to monitor that situation? It's kind of where Titan HST sort of comes into play, because you can actually use this as a communication tool, right? And you can also use it as a monitoring tool to where people are able to give information back and forth in two ways. So that being said, now you have to figure out who actually is in charge of that specific incident. Now, it sounds odd, because if you think about an organization, you think it's always going to be the CEO or the president of the organization or the city council member, or the mayor or the city manager, or whoever's at the top of your list. But that's not always true, right? So if you think of an incident broken down into whose area of responsibility it is. So if it's a downed tree, if you will, that's an incident, right? That would be your facilities, your public works, things like that would be in charge of that, right? Obviously, if it's a missing person, maybe we go into your law enforcement or your security agencies that you're working with specifically in that area. Right. So have an understanding of what the instance could possibly be and who is going to be lead in that is critical. And that really reduces that friction time between when a call goes out, when something occurs, and who can step up and take charge. Right. And so having that built out before an incident occurs, really, again, like I said, it reduces that friction, it reduces that ability, that gap in the reaction time. And that's at the end of the day, that's the most important part about having an incident management plan, right? Is understanding whose role is what and how we can start getting the ball rolling to be able to mitigate any of the impacts that that incident specifically has on your operations. Now, that at the end of the day is what we do with business continuity, right? We're reducing the impacts of any incident that could potentially happen on business operations. So to have a nice robust plan, we need to have a couple different things. We need to have a detection, right, or monitoring of what's going on, right? We need to have the understanding the issue. We have to understand how to mitigate the issue, and then how do we recover from that issue? And so those areas there being completely taken a deeper look at. So let's look at monitoring. So I think it would be impossible, maybe not, maybe I'm stretching when I say impossible, but really close to impossible to monitor every potential incident that can impact your organization. However, if we take a look at the major things that can impact the organization, so say weather, for instance, right? If you have a daily weather report, right? Most of us, when we get up in the morning, before we walk out the door, we take a look at what the weather's going to be. We need to know what clothes we are going to need to put on, right? So here in Southern California, maybe it's a little bit different than everybody that are back east right now, with the idea that it's snowstorms are occurring. So we have to know what that's going to be. How does that weather impact our supply chain again, right? If we have storms off the coast, does that mean that the boats are going to have a harder time getting in? We have the snowstorms, like I said, back east. Are they going to be able to have their regular transportation going on to get stuff to the stores, right? So how does that impact what you're doing, especially if you're on the retail side of things? So monitoring those type of things. Here we have other events that happen on a regular basis in California. We have wildland fires, right? And so how is that impacting? So, monitoring situations around the world, whether they're geopolitical or natural disaster types things or weather incidents, right? You should have, at least somebody paying attention to the situation. After that, right? So figure out what the incident is going to be and how that is going to impact it, and what is your response going to be. Okay, so after you decide that, what is part of that's going to be your response plans, right? And that kind of goes into the emergency operations plan a little bit. Other response plans that might be that goes to the level of a full blown activation of your emergency operations or your incident management area, right? If it's somebody who, say, for instance, if it's just a local issue, a local emergency, one individual gets hurt or has a medical emergency, how do you deal with that incident compared to, if the building's on fire, right? And then you want to go to mitigate that. Can we take a look at areas here? We take a look at the incidents. What can we do to stop that from impacting our business, right? And that's part of your plan as well. And really, that's the kind of the bread and butter of what we should be doing here is trying to figure out how do we stop that incident from cascading up, right, to a next level, to a disaster or to a crisis. And the recovery. What is your recovery plan? I really stress the fact when I'm teaching, right, like I teach disaster recovery, is having a solid recovery plan, right, is critical. And why is this? Because then you know the steps. Again, it reduces that friction, reduces that gap in that time that you have to be able to react. So with a solid recovery plan, how do we get back to well, I won't say back to normal because I don't think it's ever back to normal, right? But how do we get back to regular operations? And I think that's the steps that you need to start going towards and part of your plan. There's various different ways you can do this, right? Um, and I would say everything that you need to do starts with your practices, your training, your exercise, right? So one of the things that I like to do is I put out information on a monthly basis. We do this to all of our clients. We call it our monthly drill reminders, and it's just information about what's going on with the theme that we have for the month, right? So, for instance, February, we're doing well, interesting enough, winter awareness month, right? And so we're taking a look at the severe weather issues and how that impacts business, and what you can do to practice what that is as far as communications, as far as if you're going to do drills for your organization. Again, we've talked about this over and over and over. I think sometimes it's a broken record, but I need to stress this even more, that we need to get C-suite on board to be able to practice and do the drills. This is the present. This is what we're doing in the present, is having that information available and transparent to everybody in the organization. And then in the future, right, is what are we doing here is we're making sure that when this event occurs, because something will occur, right? Something will occur in your organization, whether it's a individual being hurt, or a medical emergency, or a fire in the building, or even if just the sprinklers go off or flooding. All sorts of things can happen inside your building, right? Understanding where you can move your operations quickly for the future. Today we have to really take a look at the way things around the world impact our organization. We looked at COVID coming in 2019, and 2020 impacted every organization around the world. Today, there's political crisis in Europe. We have storms that are occurring off the coast. We have earthquakes and volcanoes erupting around the world. So things like this will impact what you do here in your local area. We are a global community now. We have to think globally. I think that's the other side of it too, is don't just look at your local area when you're looking at incident management issues. Think about what could happen globally and how it impacts you locally. Hey, everybody, thank you so much for spending time with me this morning. And follow Titan HST, right? You can follow us at titanhst.com, and also follow Business Continuity Today on your favorite podcast player, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, I think. So, everybody, have a wonderful rest of your day, and I will see you next week.